At the time of making this video, one of my decks has been watched by over 35,000 people dominate on one of the main Commander gameplay shows. If you're unfamiliar, Decked Out is one of the bigger YouTube channels that does gameplay videos. They get on some amazing guests like Gavin Verhey and Malthound, amongst other amazing folks. And my deck, Neera, the Wild Mage, was submitted because they were requesting help for their Patreon. They needed assistance in order to make their gameplay show more of like a weekly thing. And at the time, I had the facilities, the funds to support them at the highest Patreon level, which was $250 a month, just because I love what they do and I wanted to support the creator that I enjoyed. So I subscribed at the $250 Patreon tier per month, and lo and behold, they selected me for one of their, gameplay budget episodes, specifically budget. And I had this Neera list, which I had made for my fiance, and I had to just do a little bit of retrofitting to it in order to make it ready for their table. And that's what we're going to be reviewing today. We're going to be watching the video to see how it went. And of course, I would encourage you to go over to their page to watch the video and of course, support them on Patreon, as I am still doing, just not at quite that high of a tier, because I had a couple months in a row of $250 and I went, I think that maybe I've spent a little bit too much money on this. So subscribe to their Patreon though, because they absolutely deserve it. I love what they're doing over there, and support the creators that you enjoy. So let's get into it. Before we get going, I just wanted to throw out a little ad for my own Patreon as well. And you can now get these tokens. You can just purchase them if you'd like. And I made a short little snippet for that. So here it is. Go ahead and enjoy. Available now on Patreon. All right, with that out of the way, let's just get into it. Let's just kick off the episode.
Zabricus. And thanks to our patron sponsor, Tempest, we will be doing a $100 budget theme.
As always, thank you to our sponsors, Tales of Adventure, Moxfield, and Ultimate Guard, and today's episode sponsor, Zaximus Studios, but more on them later in the video.
That's enough from us for now. Let's go ahead and meet the players.
Hey everybody, I'm Zabricus, and I am a Magic the Gathering content creator of all trades. I'm also a cosplayer, though this particular show I am not in
this
cosplay.
episode, by the way.
For today's show, I am piloting a Neem Pakal 1000th Moon, where the goal is to just create lots of one little gnomes, and then go wide, make them bigger, and just smash face.
Hi everyone, my name's Malthound. You can find me on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram, touching cards, trying to touch hearts, and most importantly, telling you if I'd touch your commander's parts. I always come down to Decked Out to have a good time, so today I'm playing resident fun guy, Xavier Saul.
Somebody needs to stop this man.
I'll be making lots of saprolings and fungus, and then sacrificing them to either proliferate or populate as I see fit.
I'm MTG Nerd Girl, and today for our budget game, I had to make Arcades, the
Arcades
strategist.
is a really strong
This deck will
budget
easily
commander, by
be
the way.
under $100, and it's super cool. I've been wanting to make it forever. I'm going to get to play a bunch of really cheap defender creatures that are going to make other creatures draw cards and just give me general value. And then I can use my commander or other cards like High Alert to smash my opponents really hard.
I'm Airball, and
here
today
we go.
we're spinning the wheel with Neera Wild Mage. This is a deck list that was submitted by one of our patrons, Tempest, and it's a deck that's about manipulating the top of your library to put big spells into play off of Neera's ability. We're going to be casting small cantrips like Consider, manipulating the top of our library with things like Preordain and Soothsaying, and then cheating big things into play like One with the Multiverse and Atali.
All right, let's pause for a second. So we're 2 minutes into the episode. Airball, by the way, love that guy, and he does a great job this episode of piloting the deck. I just want to take a moment to discuss what he said about the Neera list. So absolutely, it is about manipulating the top deck. And, you know, in a budget format, especially if you're trying to fit in some of the heavier hitting spells, which are a couple bucks a piece, like a time stretch is like $3 or $4, for instance. Those spells are going to eat up a majority of your budget if you're trying to build it for around 100 to 150 bucks. And the total budget that I was given, I was told to keep it around 150 or less. And so I think my final list, like when I put it in TCG Player, was like 139 or 140, something like that. And I didn't feel the need to stretch the budget all the way to 150 because there was probably a couple cards I could have put in there that would have been really mean, or I could have made concessions to include certain things like Sensei's Divining Top, for instance, or maybe like a scroll rack. But I don't know. I just felt like in an effort to make it more dynamic and have a little bit more variance, which I enjoy in Neera, I sort of built her as a chaos deck to begin with. I didn't want to include those things, so I didn't. So this deck list that Airball is going to be piloting is a little bit more random, but there's still enough of these cantrippy spells that you can manipulate the top of your library with, you know, surveilling, scrying, etc. So you should be in a good position to sort of cast what you need when you need it. And it's going to come up in a later portion of the episode, but you can have all of these impactful like extra turn spells and all that type of stuff, but how do you actually win? The deck list is really heavy in certain cards like Desolation Twin or Atali, for instance, and various other creatures that I can cast off the top for free. And then with extra turns, it's pretty easy to swing out and kill people. So there's a very, very clear way that we're going to be progressing our board and then winning. So that's sort of the TLDR on the deck and what we're going to be doing with this deck. So let's just watch Airball pilot it. We're going to kind of skip around to some of the main highlights and what Airball did on his turn. So let's just get right into that.
I'm going to cast my favorite Star Trek Pride crossover, Otherworldly Gaze. It's an instant. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put any number of them in your graveyard and the rest back on top in any order, and it has flashback.
Yeah, so before we even get into Airball's second turn here, which I believe he's just ramping, let's just double check.
Let's play another basic island and pay 2.
Yeah, so he just ramps on turn 2 with a talisman, which is great. I mean, Neera wants ramp. She's an expensive commander, so having the availability to cast these things to get Neera out earlier is great. But I just want to highlight these cards with flashback. So things like Otherworldly Gaze, for instance, or maybe something like a Faithless Looting, that type of thing. Those cards are incredible. But Otherworldly Gaze, in particular in this deck, is just insane. Having the availability to cast this at a point in the game where you can really sort of just dig through that like little top that you need to get to those spells is so important. And having the availability of flashback to get this back from your graveyard at a later date as well is just incredible. I've been really high on cards with more modal aspects or cards that have these instances where you can cast them again, even if it's a little bit more expensive, because in a budget setting in particular, it's going to be a bit slower. And in that circumstance, I think you're afforded the sort of option to run these cards that have more of a higher CMC that you may not otherwise run, or cards that, for instance, you would be willing to pay the flashback costs at a later time. But even then, I think Otherworldly Gaze is just so good that you could probably just fit it into a higher budget list as well. So give this card a look if you haven't already used it for your Spellslinger decks or for, you know, top deck manipulation purposes. It's really good, so give it a look.
On your end step, I'll take 1 pain from the talisman and I will cast Opt. I'll scry 1 and draw. Oh, it's that card I put on top with Otherworldly Gaze.
This is how we win.
And let's untap. I'm going to play this Crystal Grotto for turn. It adds 1 mana of any color if I filter something through it, and I get to scry 1. I'm going to go ahead and bottom that one. And we'll pay 2 for an Izzet Signet. Pay 1, make an Izzet. And then we'll pay 3 mana for a Worn Power Stone. ETB's tapped, taps for 2 colorless mana. And we'll pass.
The Is It player is ramping to Oblivion
Yeah,
right
wait a
now. Like,
minute.
what is happening?
Sultai left in the dust.
All right, so I want to talk about a few things in this sequence of events here. So Airball, first off, casts an opt at Nerd Girl's end step. And again, this is just like getting the value to like cycle through your deck. It's just so important. I mean, if you're in the early stages of the game and you don't have a lot of ramp in your hand, you're going to want to cast these because they're just going to replace themselves anyway. So great on that. And then additionally, he played a land, which is Crystal Grotto. We should talk about Crystal Grotto for a second because these like scry lands like Zhalfirin Void and Crystal Grotto, for instance, that scry you, maybe are not the best in terms of like a higher level of play. But when you're in a budget format and you're playing Neera and you're trying to manipulate the top deck, these are incredible because it's not like a Temple of Epiphany that comes into play tapped. And yes, it gives you access to colors, of course. I'm not discrediting that. But these come in untapped. Immediately, you can tap them for mana. Crystal Grotto, you can actually filter mana to fix yourself if you need it. It's a little bit inefficient. But the point is, they're a scry land that comes in untapped. And Neera has a very heavy, colorless mana portion to her casting. So playing these early is not really a bad thing. It's not going to be detrimental to your game plan. And then playing them later, you can actually sort of manipulate the top deck in response to, well, before a trigger, I should say, before you actually cast anything with Neera. So I am just so high on these lands. Is that the right way to say it? Yeah, I'm so high on these lands. And then there's also this element of ramping through Is It. So I made a video sort of like deck building guidelines, like that sort of thing. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But he is just off to a hot start with his ramp. And I know for a fact through these game shows that they sort of allow you to mulligan until you get a relatively keepable hand. They don't want you to have like Soul Ring and all that type of stuff, but there's a good chance that Airball had multiple different options in hand, probably like the Is It Signet and a Talisman in hand to begin the game. And with Neera, that's exactly where you want to be because you need to be able to get Neera out as soon as possible. I mean, the earlier the better. But I've also seen this come up a lot more recently where people have been like cutting ramp options and trimming down on lands. I don't know if it's just like a me thing or if I've seen it more frequently crop up on Reddit and like that type of thing. People are sort of like including less of this. But things like Worn Power Stone, which is a 3-mana rock that taps for 2, is really, really great in a budget list still. Like, I don't want people to shy away from how good some of these like 3-mana rocks are just because they don't fit into the higher level competitive sort of like staging that we are getting used to in Commander. You can still have an insanely powerful list. Like with Airball's current board state, he has 2 rocks out that basically are available for 1 mana, a Worn Power Stone for 2, and now 3 lands. So next turn, he gets to play Neera if he likes. And that's, what is that, turn 3? Like, it's insane. It's so good. So I think that these rocks are really underrated, and I would definitely give them a look if you're building your next budget deck. In particular, if you have a commander or other cards that require a large amount of colorless mana to get out, it just makes sense. So give it a look.
I will pass.
We're going to tap 6 for Melik. Is It Paragon? It's a 2/4 for 6. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You can cast instants and sorceries from the top. When you do, copy it and choose new targets for the copy.
No, thank you.
And the top card is, of course, a mountain.
Perfect.
Well, it's the next one that really matters.
And I'll play this Fiery Islet as land for turn and pass.
All right, so a few things here. I have been trying to construct my decks in a way where you're sort of playing at second place for a majority of the game. And so these opportunities to like ramp out in the early stage and have setup turns like this where you're playing Melik, like, yeah, it's a scary card, but like when the other people at the table are representing like 15 or 20 damage on like turn 5, which happens more than you think, then you suddenly don't become as much of a threat and it takes the heat off of you. This is foreshadowing as well. We'll get to that when we get to that. But in a circumstance like this, as an Is It player who has, a more budgetary deck that I'm working with, this is the exact position that I want to be in. I'm behind the other players, but I still have enough life in me. Like I have 2 blue up right now. I have a Talisman up and I have a Fiery Islet out. I can still, counter something or have the availability to cast something. on somebody's end step, etc. So I'm not terribly upset at this stage of the game. And I think that more of us should start looking at trying to play back a little bit or reserving ourselves and not running everything out, because all of a sudden, if you're running all this stuff out, you become this immediate threat that has to be dealt with or the game ends. So we'll see that in a little bit, but let's keep going.
All right, I'll play this mountain that you had no idea about as the land for turn. And here's 6 for the commander, Neera Wild Mage. She's a 2/7 who reads, whenever you cast a spell, you can put it on the bottom of its owner's library. If you do, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost, then put the rest on the bottom in a random order, and that only happens once per turn. And I'll pass.
So
this turn felt probably a little bit like innocuous, like it didn't feel like there was actually much going on, but I promise you it's more important than it looks, because if Neera gets to actually stick around for a full turn cycle and Airball is able to sort of get this advantage of mana because he is just flush with it at this point, then I think that the game is going to crumble around all the other players. And that's just my assumption in this position, because I've played enough Izzet in my life, like hundreds and hundreds of games, to understand that this is a very good spot to be as an Izzet player. I have mana up for countering. I have my commander out at present. It's a good spot to be in. So don't underestimate Airball's current spot where he's at. I also want to take this time to discuss an interesting interaction with Displacer Kitten, which is not immediately obvious, so let's go into it. It never comes up in this game. Displacer Kitten is a disgusting card in a majority of decks, and in Neera, it basically goes infinite most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time. So what you can do with Displacer Kitten, if you have that and Neera out on the battlefield at the same time, is you have a cast trigger for both. So Neera wants to put the spell in the bottom of your library, and Displacer Kitten wants to blink something whenever you cast a non-creature spell. So the way that it's going to work is you'll stack the trigger so that the Displacer Kitten is going to resolve first, allowing you to blink Neera. And why does this matter? This matters because the new Neera has not seen the once per turn clause yet, because this is a brand new instance of Neera on the battlefield. Now, after it resolves, you then use the other trigger that was already on the stack from the last Neera to put the spell on the bottom of your library. You exile off the top until you hit something else. Ideally, it's a non-creature spell, and then you can just keep repeating this over and over again until you get a spell that you want. Now, you can build your deck in ways where you have no creatures in your deck aside from Displacer Kitten. I've seen Neera builds like this, meaning if you get them out on the battlefield together, or you find a way to tutor out the kitten immediately, then play Neera, the game is basically over, because you can just go until you hit your extra turn spell like Time Stretch, cast it for free, and then on your next turns, then you just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and the game ends. So don't underestimate how good the kitten is in this deck list. You may be tempted to cut it because it's like a $7 or $8 card, but there's a reason that it is expensive. This is, I think, the most expensive card that I had in my deck list, and with good reason. I think that this specific card allows you to do things that pretty much any other card in the game cannot do. So having the availability to cycle through your deck and hit mostly whatever spell you want. Of course, in my version, I'm running more creature heavy builds because I don't have as much of a budget. It's not as good, but it's still really good. It allows you to keep going until you get something that you want, or you hit a creature, which in most circumstances, like a 1 mana opt to get a Desolation Twin with 20/20 power out, it's pretty good. So even in those circumstances where it's not the golden scenario where you hit your extra turn spell every time because you built your deck in this specific way because you don't have any creature spells in your library, it's still good. So don't cut Displacer Kitten if you're looking to run this deck. And let's get on with the rest of the show here.
On your end step, I'm going to flash back Otherworldly Gaze from the graveyard, and I'm going to get a Neera trigger, but I'm going to decline it because I actually want the Otherworldly Gaze to stack the library. Look at the top 3, put any number of them in the graveyard, and the rest back on top. That's really good. Okay. I'm going to put this Commander Sphere and Halimar Depths into the graveyard, and Otherworldly Gaze will go to exile, and this card is going to go on top, and it's Dig Through Time. And then I'll go to untap. And in my upkeep, before I draw my card for turn, I'm going to cast Dig Through Time, exiling 4 cards from the graveyard to do it, and we'll cast it off the top. Dig Through Time is an instant with Delve. Look at the top 7 cards of your library, put 2 of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom in a random order.
This is pretty crazy.
I will get a Neera trigger. I'm going to decline it, but I will also get a Melic trigger because I cast the spell from my library, and I'll get 2 copies of Dig Through Time.
Ooh.
Is there anything better than copying a Delve spell for free? Dig Through Time can sometimes just practically be Ancestral Recall, and then to get 2 of them, that's awesome. So we'll go 70.
Yeah, Airball is, he's really feeling the power of Izzet here. So the Delve casted Dig Through Time copied with Melic to allow him to look at the top 14 of his library and take the best 4. Man, that's really good. And I know he equated this to a Dig Through Time. Of course, it's not, he equated this to an Ancestral Recall. It's not exactly an Ancestral Recall. I know there's going to be people nitpicking him for saying that, but it equates to something similar. It's going to be just like 2 mana to essentially look at the top 7. And honestly, in my book, if I am the person that's casting this for only 2 mana and I get to look at the top 7 and pick the best 2, there's a lot of circumstances where I would almost prefer that over an Ancestral Recall because the card selection that you get from looking at the top 7 is crazy. This is all to say that we're not competing with Ancestral Recall at all, but what I am saying is that if you're not running Dig Through Time in your list because it's only like a 20-cent card, you probably should be running Dig Through Time, so give it a look.
Now we'll go ahead and go to my draw step. And I guess I will reveal the card I will draw to you, which is an island. And now the new top card is Etali, Primal Storm. But unfortunately, that's not an instant or sorcery, so I can't cast it from the top.
Oh, darn.
I'll play this island as land for turn, and we'll pay 3 for Gale, Waterdeep Prodigy. It's a 1/3. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand, you can cast one of the other type from your graveyard. And if you cast the spell from your graveyard that way, then it gets exiled instead of going back to the bin. All right, and we'll pay 1 blue and a life, as much as that sucks, to play a Mystic Remora. It's an enchantment with cumulative upkeep. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, I can draw a card unless they pay 4. And I'll pass.
On my
So Airball passes here. He plays out Gale, which, by the way, I just want to point out that Gale Waterdeep Prodigy is a card that I slept on for a really long time. Like, I did not use Gale. I thought Gale was kind of bad. I was like, I don't really need this effect to get these instants and sorceries out of the bin. But here's the thing. Gale allows you to harness value out of cards that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And on top of that, if you have lots of like cantrippy spells that have ended up in your graveyard, like a Brainstorm, for instance, or whatnot, you get to use Gale as sort of a value piece to continuously cycle these things out of your graveyard. I think that Gale is really underplayed, I would say, a majority of the time. Like I've only seen him once or twice at all the tables I've been in since Baldur's Gate was released. And whenever I use him in my decks, I'm always impressed with what I'm able to do. And I'm lucky, or we're lucky that in this game, we actually will get to see Gale do some things in this game. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I think we'll get to see the utility of actually having Gale out on the battlefield. So let's get on with the rest of the episode. Real quick, before we get into Zabricus's turn here, the Etali being on top of the library is really not that big of a deal most of the time. Mind you, most of the time. Because on other people's turns, we get to trigger Neera. So if you are playing Neera to sort of like the best of your ability, let's call it that, and I believe Airball has done a great job so far, he should be able to cast the Etali off of the top with just like a single blue or a single red for an instant or sorcery, or for an instant rather. So don't be dissuade. Like, he made the comment that Etali can't be cast at this time because it's not an instant or sorcery, but it's a little bit of mirage. It's illusion, because guess what? Neera says, I'm gonna cast it for 1 blue on your turn. Don't worry, I can't cast it right now. It's not an instant or sorcery, but guess what? Girl over here is gonna cast it for 1 blue. So don't be deceived. It's actually a good thing that the Etali ended up on top.
With Nissa coming into play, Mystic Remora is going to trigger. I'm going to ask you, are you going to pay the 4 to draw? Otherwise, I draw a card. But before that happens, I'm going to pay 2 and Pain to cast Reality Shift that says exit target creature, its controller manifests the top card of their library. I am going to get a Neera trigger. I'm going to decline to cast the Reality Shift and instead put it on the bottom. And that means that I will get the top card of my library into play because it's a non-land. That's going to be the Atali we saw earlier. And I will reveal the top card and ask you if you want to pay 4 to prevent me from drawing this basic island.
My man, I do not have the kind of cheese for that operation. I need to be, I'm trying to draw an out right now. I can't be paying 4 to save your top deck. That's, you're going to draw that island.
I will draw that island and reveal.
So this is a really great position for Airball. As I literally just mentioned, we are on this bandwagon of waiting for another person's turn, casting an instant, and then we get the Atali. And then Airball did it with finesse. He just like swooshed his shot here because Mystic Remora, the trigger for that to pay, went on the stack. And of course, Airball doesn't want to draw the Atali. Why would he do that when he can cast it for 2 blue? So he taps for Reality Shift, and Reality Shift, instead of exiling a creature, he decides to tuck it on the bottom with Neera's ability, and he gets Atali for free. Well, free. You get what I mean. And then he gets to draw something, which rewards him because he then draws into an island because Maldhound refuses to pay the 4 or declines to pay the 4, however you want to say it. And it's just a great situation for Airball. I mean, I'm a little bit worried about Nerd Girl's turn coming up because she has so much in the air. But on this premise, Airball is doing a fantastic job of piloting this deck, and we should all learn from him. So as we get into MTG Nerd Girl's turn, I haven't actually focused on other people's turns as much, just because like I don't feel like it's fair to, like, you know, quote unquote steal other people's content to that level. But I think this turn is important, so let's just watch through Nerd Girl's turn together. We'll add a little bit of commentary.
Okay.
I have never drawn so many
POV, it's
cards in a
Maldhound.
row without finding a good one since the last time I was on Decked Out. I'm beginning to think this is entrapment.
My cumulative upkeep will go to 4, and we'll do 3 to Airball and 1 to Maldhound.
Thank you.
God bless.
I graciously accept.
I'm gonna look at the top card. See what it is. I'll start there. I'll pay 2 to cast Wall of Roots, an 0/5 that allows me to put a -0/-1 counter on itself to add mana.
Wall of Roots is disgusting,
when I cast it, I will
by
get
the
an
way,
extra
and it's super
1/1
cheap.
bird, and I will get to draw a card from Arcades. I'll play a Forest for turn. I'll play an Assault Formation, which does something similar to what Arcades does, but now it works for himself. Each creature I control assigns combat damage with its toughness. I can also pay mana to allow creatures with
Really
Defender
good
to
card.
attack, and also
Assault
to
Formation.
give creatures more toughness.
Speaking of paying mana, are you going to pay 4 to keep me from drawing that Consider?
Nope, you can have it.
All right.
You get to cast in your upkeep for free anyway.
And I will reveal a Desolation Twin?
The confusion heightens.
You don't have mana for Consider, right?
I do not.
Thank gosh, because you could just put it into play.
I sure could.
Maybe I should actually kill Airball instead, huh? So we're gonna go to combat.
So Nerd Girl just says before we go to combat, before she goes to combat, let's just examine this board state. So there are a lot of threats here, and she is able to effectively kill one person, but not multiple people given her current board state here. So we're just going to sort of play this out, and then I want to talk about the decisions that she made and whether or not they were the quote-unquote right decisions, and there's heavy quotes around that.
And Zabricus, you're getting 30 in the air?
I can't declare any blockers because they're all flying, but before damage is dealt, I am going to pay 3 to Generous Gift the Wall of Shards. So it lets me destroy target permanent, and its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token.
I'm gonna do the math later. I'm gonna tap for some mana. It's gonna be 1 white and a bunch of green. 9 mana. And on my hover barrier, I'm gonna give this creature +0 +10.
Oh!
And then I will pay the other 6 mana into my Assault Formation, giving all my creatures an additional 2 butt.
Cool.
Look at Airball's face. He's
So
like,
this-
What are you gonna pay for?
I just dodged a bullet, and boy did you. The cruel irony here is that Nerd Girl's attack even if Arcades got generous gifted, because I saw this comment crop up a couple times in the comments for some reason, she literally just played an assault formation, meaning that they would still be dealing damage with their toughness. So, I mean, you don't get the draw off of casting, but they would still deal the damage. So it's just, there's no point. They're already in attacks. She would have had to have done it before attacks. It doesn't matter. Like the point is they would still deal the damage. Let's just analyze briefly like what happened here. So Zabricus is in a very clear position, and she will tell you in the interim here when they go to the cuts in between that if Zabricus was not killed, she would have been able to effectively just murder somebody on her turn. So Nerd Girl sees this and knows that if Zabricus gets to live, then that means that she is probably dead because she is one of the bigger threats at the table, because Maldhound is just kind of spinning his wheels and not really accomplishing much. I mean, I don't want to be mean, but he even admits it himself sort of in the episode. So the person that is the most threatening in this situation is Zabricus, and that allows Airball to sort of sneak under the radar because he's definitely number 2 right now in terms of like threat, because this Neera list is random, so we can't always rely on there being a threat from the Neera list. And you can make the argument that this was not like a good attack. I saw a few comments that were sort of like lighting Nerd Girl up regarding these attacks, but I mean, look, there's one choice. You either kill Airball or you kill Zabricus. It's sort of like a pick your poison type of moment. And there wouldn't have necessarily been king making, I think, in either way, because the equalizer here would have been Maldhound and his ability to hopefully get something off the top to better impact the board state. So I don't think that this was a wrong attack. I don't think this was like a throw for content, so to speak. This is just a genuine board position. And in the past, when they've had Patreon episodes on, nobody else has won a game with their list. So quite clearly, they're not just like favoring the patron list. This was just threat assessment from Nerd Girl saying that Zabricus has got to go.
So this...
Are you going to pay for?
No, you can draw.
I'll be honest, I've never seen Airball so happy to pilot a list, and I'm just glad he's having a grand old time with Izzet Spellslinger Chaos. I love this list. It's clear that he's enjoying himself. It makes the gameplay experience so much better when that type of thing happens. So anyways.
Out of mana, so I will pass the turn.
Go to my upkeep, and I have a Mystic Remora trigger. I think I will decline to pay it. And in my upkeep, before I draw my card, we're going to pay 1 to cast Consider, and that's going to give me a Neera trigger. So I will choose to put that Consider on the bottom of my library and instead cascade into the first non-land card in my library, which is Desolation Twin. It's not an instant or sorcery, so it doesn't trigger Melik, but it is a 10/10 Eldrazi, and I am casting it, so I get a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi token.
Yeah, so Airball here is, again, he's living the Izzet Spellslinger dream, but with finesse, because we get to cast cards like Desolation Twin for 1 mana, and by the way, it is cast. Neera tells you to cast the spell. So Desolation Twin comes in and he gets 20 power on the board for 1 mana. Yeah, that seems pretty good. And Desolation Twin is one of those cards too that like it fits in perfectly to a budget list. It's like 30 cents or something like that, because generally speaking, you never get to cast it in order to get the other 10/10. So it's right at home in this Spellslinger list.
Guess the card that you've been looking for, just waiting for.
I'll scream so loud and for so long.
Yeah, let's go to combat, and I think everything is actually going to stay home except Atali, which is going to come Nerd Girl, because Maldhound is my good time boy.
Yeah, good time boys, that's what I'm saying.
So we'll exile the top of card of each player's library,
and then this is how the cookie crumbles. I think that he probably had the win regardless from this point on. However, one with the multiverse, I cannot believe that this card is still only like $2, or I think it's like $3 for the base version, and you can get an extended art version of this card for like $4. The power that this card offers is just insane. And I tend to like it a little bit more than Omniscience because it gives you the availability of casting off the top. And there's a lot of synergies in the deck that allow you to cast off the top. So I love one with the multiverse, and I think Airball is going to love it even more.
block with the big 6/6 wall now.
Sure. Okay, so Tali is going to die. The walls will trade, and then we'll go to main phase 2.
All right, yeah, so Atali dies here, but that's totally fine. Valid sacrifice. He gets to, set up the top of his library with the scry on the defender wall that he got from Nerd Girl. And then the one with the multiverse is about to do some really insane things. So let's just watch that.
I will use one with the multiverse's ability to cast Beacon of Tomorrow for free, targeting myself. Target player takes an extra turn after this one.
Good card in this deck, turns out.
Oh no.
That's a sorcery that's going to trigger Gale, which lets me cast an instant from my graveyard. That's going to be dig through time.
You've done a lot of you've lived the Is It player dream.
Oh no.
I'm here to tell you we're playing the game by some rules
no.
I'm going to remove 3 counters from the Death Spore Thallid. Saproling comes into play. It gets sacrificed to create 1 blue mana. I tap a swamp. I negate the extra turn spell.
Oh, you're gonna be sad. I am about to pull the biggest Uno reverse card on Maulhound here ever. I have been trying to get this card into my graveyard all game, and the negate puts it there. So negate is
Airball is just frothing at the mouth to get this extra turn spell off. And like you said, Maulhound just set it up for him. He just teed it up perfectly. Let's just watch it.
targeting Beacon of Tomorrows.
Beacon of Tomorrows, yes.
All right. That's going to go to the bin, and that's totally fine. My land for turn is going to be a Mystic Sanctuary.
I hate you.
And when it enters the battlefield untapped, I can put target instant or sorcery from my graveyard on top of my library.
I hate you so much.
So I'm going to put this Beacon of Tomorrows on top of my library. And I'm going to use Melik's ability to pay 8.
This is beautiful.
It was a good try. It was a good try.
I'm happier this way, honestly, because now he might win.
We're going to pay 8 to cast from the top of my library Beacon of Tomorrows. Then whenever I cast an instant or sorcery spell from my library, I get to copy it and choose new targets
the cookie
for the
crumbles
copy.
from here on out.
So I'm going to copy that Beacon of Tomorrows, and I'm going to take 2 extra turns, and I'll shuffle it into my library.
We can go get a coffee break?
Yeah.
We'll come back. Let us know if we're alive.
And we'll go to untap
Blech.
for extra turn number 1.
Oh, wake me when he's done.
And reveal a Temple of Epiphany. Pay 1 and cast Soothsaying. Pay 5 to shuffle my library, or pay X to look at the top X and put them back on top in any order. I'm going to play this Evolving Wilds as land for turn. I'm going to crack it. So I'll put that mountain into play off of the Evolving Wilds and get a free look at a new top
Fetch
card.
to get something different on
Just a
top.
mountain.
Very important. Very good.
Pay 6 to look at the top 6 and put them in any order. So we'll put them on top in this order. I'm going to reveal that the top card is an Is It Charm. An Is It with 1 colorless floating, and take a pain to cast that Is It Charm. And that is going to trigger Melik. I'll get 2 copies of Is It Charm. The modes on both are going to be draw 2, discard 2.
And you're not using a Neera trigger for either.
No, we're not going to use the Neera trigger because I know that these top 4 cards are not particularly good. I'm going to
booty buns.
discard these 4 cards, 2 mountains, a soul ring, and a firemind vessel.
Oh my gosh.
And the new top card is a Midnight Clock. And I guess we'll use one with the multiverse to cast it for free. Midnight Clock is a mana rock. I can pay 3 mana to put an hour counter on it at the beginning of each upkeep. I get to put an hour counter on it, and when it has 12, I shuffle my hand and my graveyard into my library and draw 7. Let's go to combat, and I'm going to send both 10/10s at Nerd Girl.
Wow, that is
Make him have it.
many 10/10s. All right, we'll
Good
do
old Desolation
Wall of
Twin.
Roots and Wall of Blossoms and an elephant in front of one of them, and I will take the other.
Which one?
Oh man, I'll kill the creature one.
Okay.
Yeah, like the token, you have blue, you could have a bounce spell.
I'm hoping you have blue, you have a bounce spell. So, which 2 would you like to kill?
Seems only fair. I'll kill both of your creatures. Your card creatures.
Walls.
Yeah.
All right, the elephant lives another day.
And we'll go to my last extra turn. For now.
No.
Ooh, the poor Storm player. Only on his 3rd turn and no porridge left.
To draw this island. The new top.
All right, I'm going to pause it here and we're just going to let the rest of it sort of like play in the background as like we talk about this, because it gets out of hand. As soon as a list like this is able to cast that first extra turn spell, generally speaking, it's going to be over. And in this circumstance, he has the card Soothsaying out. And Soothsaying, for, you know, those of you that are unaware, just allows you to continuously sort of like pay mana into it to look at the top cards of your library, and then you can use that to manipulate the top to whatever you need for your next Neera trigger. And in this circumstance, because I was able to juice up the deck a little bit, we got cards like Rise of the Eldrazi, for instance, in the deck, which gives you multiple things that you can do. Take extra turns, kill things, etc. And from this point on, there are enough extra turn spells in the deck. There's enough of a density that Airball can probably reliably hit them. And then for the extra turn spells that end up in the bin, he can cast something like a Pneumatic Deluge on his time stretch and take like 6 extra turns. You know, it's over. And they wrap it up shortly thereafter. Everybody's like poking fun at the fact that he's just taking extra turns. And I love the comments where like it's like Maldhound, make a 1/1, and then it's like Airball, oh, well, on my 7th extra turn. I think it's so true with a deck like this. You're just gonna take a lot of these extra turns, but that's how you win. And as long as you have a way to win with this deck, i.e. I have a Desolation Twin token, a bunch of creatures on the battlefield, I can wipe your boards, etc., the game ends and nobody feels bad that you're just spinning your wheels and not doing anything. And I think that's the bigger takeaway, is that you need some way to close out the game with the extra turn spells. I think people get frustrated in these circumstances where people have nothing to do with the extra turns except play a land, maybe play another extra turn spell, and they have no way to close it out. But in a budget list, you can still find easy ways to do that, like the Atali, the Desolation Twin, etc. So from this point on, Airball closes it out. Everybody agrees to concede because they don't want to go through 7 extra turns. And, you know, honestly, I'm happy. It saved the editors some editing time in the end, and Airball gets the win. And this was the first ever patron win. So this was the first patron submitted deck that is won on their channel. So I'm really happy to sort of have that accolade as the first one who submitted a deck to this channel, and also, you know, have a win under my belt in the same aspect. I did submit another deck for a later video. No spoilers there. But that deck list is not a budgetary list. So we'll get to see probably some crazy things out of another Is It deck that I wanted to submit, and we'll see how that list goes in that video. If you stuck around to the end of the video, thank you very much. And of course, check out my Patreon. As I sort of plugged earlier, I'm really happy with how the tokens turned out, and I'll be happy to ship them to you. So go ahead and, you know, sign up on the Patreon if you want signed tokens, or if you just want to buy tokens that are not signed, that option is also available. I have a very limited supply right now, but I just don't know what the demand is going to be. So if it turns out that the demand is really high and they like sell out immediately, I'll order a bunch more and I'll let you guys know when they're restocked. But go check out the Patreon for all those details. In addition to this, I promised that I was going to do like a little bit of like a look into my life, because I didn't post anything last week, and I had some comments that were like a bit concerned that I missed a week. And I understand. It's oftentimes, if a YouTuber starts to like miss some of their uploads or posts or whatever, there's sort of like this assumption that like, you know, what if they've left? And there's also been a lot of YouTubers that have been quitting this year. But I'm just getting started with this channel. I have no intention of leaving it. It's more so me sort of finding my footing as a YouTube content creator and making sure that things that I make, I am both proud of. I feel like they're informative and useful for other people, or at least entertaining. And sometimes I feel a little bit overwhelmed by that prospect. For example, I actually, this last couple of weeks, I went through my videos, I rewatched a bunch of them, and I actually ended up taking down a video, which was my proxy discussion or proxy debate video, if you want to call it that, just because I felt like that the content was overall good, but the discussion that was surrounding the content in the comments was just not helpful, and it just wasn't a healthy discourse, let's just call it that. There was a lot of people who felt like I was correct in my, my take, but it felt like people weren't really watching the video and taking what I had to say with the spirit that it was given, because my stance with proxies always will be that they are okay. And I think that we should be allowing proxies, and we should have a healthy community and a game environment that allows anybody to play, including people that can't afford to buy the more expensive cards, even if it's only like a $50 to $100 deck. If it costs you $10 to print the cards and that's how you want to play, I'm cool with it. Go ahead and do it. I have no issues whatsoever with that. But I think that people get lost in the initial sort of like fervor, or they may not actually watch the entirety of the video to understand what my perspective really is. Maybe in the future I'll do another video where I sort of just come out of the gate and say like, I love proxies. They're great. I use them myself in some, of my lists, and I do it for my CDH lists, and really they should be available. But, and then the rest of the video is the but, like why I think that they can be bad, because quite honestly, it's not necessarily that there is a proxied card that there is a problem. That's not always the case. It can be, depending on what is printed on that proxied card. But a majority of the time, it's that there's certain cards, not just proxies, but whatever that proxy is representing, that can be disruptive or a bit skewing to the overall course and the desire for what you want to accomplish in that game. And I think that there's a better video to be had, one of which it's a bit more positive and a bit more healthy, hopefully, in the discourse in the comments. But proxy discussion is just such a toxic discussion or toxic debate, where there's a very big like fissure in the community. Like when I looked at Reddit posts and I went into the analytics of them, a lot of times it was like a 50-50 split, where people were either upvoting or downvoting a comment, regardless of your alliance, if you disagreed or agreed with the use of proxies. And that wasn't the point of my video. So I took that one down. I analyzed a lot of other videos on my channel just to make sure that it's sort of like what I wanted to accomplish. And I feel like a majority of my other videos are in that direction. And I'm still learning. I'm still playing around with things. As you saw in this video, I had some B-roll going in the background that I'm rather proud of. And it's not 100% yet, but as I get better with videography, I think that it will improve in performance. So there's more to be learned and more to explore in that direction, which I'm really excited about. In addition to this, there is like a few life event things that have been going on. So I had to block my like regular work schedule this last couple of weeks to work more so I could have extra time off on this upcoming weekend, or actually the weekend that I'm filming this, before people get here for a LAN party, because I'm having a LAN party this weekend. We're going to be playing Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, GameCube. Some of the highlights of games are going to be Super Smash Bros. Melee. We're going to be playing some OG Halo 3 on the 360, Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops 1 Zombies. I'm a huge gamer. A lot of my history actually before doing any of the card game stuff in my life was actually playing video games. And one of my biggest connections with my brother, and the reason I think we're so close, is from video games. And a lot of my best experiences with some of my friends growing up were from video games. I still remember me and one of my friends, Dakota, trying to usher this big box TV across the floor from his upstairs room to get it out into a camper so we could play Halo 3 at 1 a.m. for an all-nighter. And we had to get a blanket on the floor and push the TV across his wooden floor and then sneakily get it out to the camper and set it up to play Halo 3 late into the evening. And I have tons of other stories just like this one of me playing games with my friends at various hours throughout the day with various different games to all sorts of various effects. I love video games, and that is what this weekend is going to be all about. But that requires a lot of setup. And that setup took me a while because I sort of had to retrofit one of my rooms. I'll see if I can maybe get some video of it. I'll take it immediately after I'm done with this, actually, and show you the room that I had to sort of retrofit. It's like a little bit of a library, and we also play Magic the Gathering in that room when I invite people over to my house. But it's a major undertaking. You can't just have everything hooked up to the same outlet, because then you're going to override the breaker and then the box will trip and then you don't have power in your house, for instance. So learning which outlets to use and running extension cords to different parts of the house and digging up my old consoles, because I own 4 Xbox 360s and different screens. It's a lot. I'm not going to lie to you. It takes up a lot of time, and the investment in order to make that happen is actually multiple days and sometimes even weeks worth of work to set it up, planning things, messaging people. Typically, it's individual messages to and from people, which I've invited like 15 people to this party. It takes a lot of effort to make happen. And so that on top of other things has really led me to sort of push back a video for a week because I really wanted to accomplish something else outside of just like the MTG space. But don't be put off. I have plenty of other MTG plans coming up in future videos. I'll give you a little sneak peek. I actually have it right here. I have this original Duelist magazine that I purchased. This sucker was like $150. You can't get them for much cheaper than that. And I'm really excited. I want to go through this thing. There you go. I want to go through this thing with you guys live. Well, not live, but in a video and walk through it and see what is in the original texts and also tell you the stories that I know about Richard Garfield and just spread the love and information of the origination of this game. Not only that, but there's other gameplay episodes that I've yet to edit. I have to get to those and put those out for you guys. And there's giveaways that I want to do. I have Kamigawa collector boosters just sitting with my Magic stuff that I want to give away at a live stream. There's so much that I have like on the docket and that I want to do. It's sort of like I feel like a glutton for choice. I have so many options for what I can do, and it's just a matter of choosing the ones that I find most inspiring to make the best content for you guys. So if you stuck around to this point in the video, thanks. This is it. That was the video. I hope that you found this little end segment interesting, a little segment into my life. And if you want to see more videos like this one where I react to certain things, either gameplay or future decks that I submit to channels for them to play, then, like the video because, it takes money to submit these things and get it to happen in the first place. So make sure that you look at my stuff and buy my things so I can do more of these. So that's it. I've been Kyle, guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.